Hi everyone. I hope you're having a good conference. I'm very pleased to join you. I probably didn't think I was going to be able to. Since I did my trailer for the conference, I've picked up a terminal illness which you may already know about. But nevertheless, I was always keen to come back and maybe record a session that could be joined to the trailer session. The original intention, as you all know, was for me to have a debate with Dr. Coley. I am keen to have a response, have a chance to have a response to that, and I'm glad of this opportunity to do that. You'll all recall the original piece of research that Dr. Coley published followed I suppose, the development of a model that was then for a domestic premises, as I understand it, that was then circulated to some LinkedIn members, and LinkedIn members were asked questions around, given the development of the model and some interventions that would be taken in it, what would the effects be on the model? And I guess the conclusion from all of that is maybe modelers are not maybe as in touch with their models, or maybe don't understand, if there are interventions, the direction of travel that the sort of outcome results would have in terms of energy, and whether increase in energy, reduction in energy. And I guess there's probably some truth in all of that. I don't think necessarily that all modelers are as in touch with their models as maybe they could or should be. There probably is some truth in some of that. But having said that, I would also contend that if the model was a domestic model, that maybe a lot of the LinkedIn members that were contacted would be more familiar with commercial models rather than domestic models, and they would behave very differently, I would suggest, than a domestic model. And indeed, I do both domestic and commercial models, and I would expect them to behave differently. One of the biggest causes, I guess, is of the performance gap, if you like, if that's what we're trying to address at this particular point in time, is effectively what goes on inside the building itself. Not so much the fabric changes or orientation changes or anything like that. It's the activity that actually happens inside the building itself. Certainly in commercial models, we've noticed that occupancy is nothing like what we would predict, or what is actually inserted sometimes in modeling software. People, we found that as a for instance, when we're doing research for UKRI, that school terms and school times, and people dropping off kids in the morning time, picking them up in the afternoon time, different populations come in the morning time, different, and wait till the late afternoon. And so we don't tend to get this ladder effect of starting at 9 o'clock, everybody out at 1 o'clock, back in at 2. So those activity levels tend to be very different, and that of itself can be something that leads to the end result prediction of performance gaps and what have you. So I in my trailer I said that it's this social dynamic that actually for me has been the one that's that we've struggled with most with when it comes to understanding the performance gap, and why we don't get the results. We don't get zero carbon when we expect it. We don't get zero energy when we expect it. So all of this came to, I suppose, my notice when I was dealing with a commercial building which was building here in Sheffield, where we actually went back afterwards and we found that the building was being used in a completely different way to the way in which we expected it to be used, even though we'd actually had lots of stakeholder engagement and what have you. Indeed, this building, we expected people to love it. It was such a great building, we thought, but in actual fact, they hated it. They really did hate it. So there is a huge disconnect between what we as designers think a building is going to be, how it's actually going to be used, how it's going to be occupied, whether in fact even the people who are actually going to use it are going to use it in the way we expect them to use it. So with all of that in mind, I've spent the last 10 years of research and indeed set up Olio, the building performance consultancy, as a vehicle to carry this research on, both in my company and also as continued research. And we have actually got £60,000 to actually help us with this research. So I suppose when we've been looking around to see industries that deliver products that actually behave in the way in which they were expected to behave, we started to see if we could find those particular parts of industry that really rely on the product being exactly as it's supposed to be when it's delivered to the customer at the end of the day, and performs exactly as the customer expects it to at the end of the day. So one of the first I suppose pieces of research that I came across, if you like, was essentially kind of thinking about the retail industry ultimately. They're kind of developing products that ultimately have to sell, and if they don't sell, then the product will effectively make a loss, and a lot of manufacturing intent and all of that kind of thing will have gone into it in order to only find that it's not working at the end and people are not buying it. So I first thought about the mobile phone and how maybe Steve Jobs thought, oh, I want to move from a touch screen to a glass screen. So I want a phone with buttons as opposed to a glass screen, and how he knew that the buttons would be a big thing to go away from. What they did was they kind of built prototypes. They actually didn't rely on the fact that a designer is going to come up with his own idea to say, okay, let's get rid of the buttons and do a glass screen, even though the massive amount of innovation and research and development that would actually have to go in the billions of pounds. So they would need to know that once they'd developed this touch screen, that it would sell not just in the thousands or hundred thousands, but it would sell in the billions to get the investment back in the first instance. So we know now that they used processes which are based around what's called agile methods. So those who want to understand a little bit more about agile and agile methods should actually just have a look at our website, which is www.oleoconsult.com/agile methods, and in there you'll kind of see some of the narrative of why agile is so useful, if you like, in not just developing and understanding the product as it's going to be used by users, but actually involving users in its co-design in the first instance, so that you actually find the problems through prototype development, bring them back into the design process, solve them at that particular moment in time, so that users actually become engaged in the process of design with the designers themselves. Designers understand what users want and understand how they will actually use the building or the product when it actually becomes a fully working, fully fledged product of itself. And so I'm advocating that the same processes that technology use, that manufacturing use, that practically every other retail or user-centric industry which is dependent on making sure that a product will work before it goes into market, that those same processes are used in the building industry. Now, we actually ended up testing this. All of the details are on the website, and I'd ask you to just have a look at and read some of the website interventions. There are also videos there as well. And this is not sort of a advert for my website or sort of audio, but it will hopefully help you to understand. Now, the reason for all of this is that if we are to reduce this 40% impact that construction industry has on climate change and carbon emissions, we need to know that buildings are going to work. We need to know that they are actually going to perform as we expect them to. And we need to understand that not only that we as designers understand how they're used, but users understand and are familiar with how they were designed and how they are expected to be used. From here, you will get designers will actually be working collaboratively with users. Users themselves will actually get confidence in the whole process of design. They will not only just like their buildings, they will love their buildings, which was part of the aspiration that we wanted, from the beginning. And from there, we can actually develop models, far, far ahead of time, that we will understand what the activity levels are, how the building's actually going to be used. And in that way, models should then be much closer to the performance expectation that we expect from them. So on that note, I was kind of keen to come back and at least introduce the whole process of agile methods. I think agile methods is something that the construction industry should be using, not just at design stage, but also in its construction stages as well. We have all of the technology. We have VR. We can bring users in and have them understand exactly what we're trying to do, and they can inform us in exactly what they want us to do, and at the same token then hopefully get ourselves back to something that we kind of understand, users will understand, and will effectively lead us to an understanding of how we close this performance gap for once and for all. So important if we are actually going to really meet the emissions reductions that we really need to be meeting. As an adjunct to all of this, agile is close to lean methods of construction. So essentially helping us to plan much more intricately what we're going to do in order to get something like the sort of 15 to 20% savings in construction that are absolutely needed if we're to start to introduce the low carbon and zero carbon scenarios that we will need as well into the future. So on that introductory note, I felt it was important to come and at least say my piece, as it were. I take the argument from Dr. Coley. I hope this is something that maybe ABIPSA, Dr. Coley, universities in general will actually begin to take a little bit more notice in. And I've always said that we're never going to solve the problem of 30% emissions or closing the performance gap by using the same methods that we'd always use. We need some different methods, and I certainly believe that the time is now to start to deploy some of these different methods that allow us to bring the problems forward from in use into the design process, and work with designers, users, in collaboration to solve some of these problems. Okay, have a good conference. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.